Time for Big Pete.
Hello everybody, welcome back. I did my championship predictions a few days ago, and the predictions continue today with the Premier League. Starting off in 20th place, bottom, the worst team in the Premier League is Watford. They lost a big bunch of their squad last season. Daryl Janmaat, Roberto Pereira, Gerald Deulofeu, Danny Welbeck, Etienne Capoue, Abdoulaye Doucouré. They signed Dan Gosling from Bournemouth in January, which helped propel their promotion push. But most importantly, they kept Sarr, who was their top scorer last season. They had the best defence in the whole of the Championship last season, but out of the promoted sides, they had the worst attack, and I think that'll prove to be their undoing. They've tried to bolster their striking options this summer by bringing in Josh King from Everton, Ashley Fletcher from Borough, and a young striker called Emmanuel Dennis from Club Brugge. Danny Rose has come in on a free while they've let go of defenders Craig Dawson, who was on loan at West Ham last season, and they've let go of young Ben Wilmot as well, which is a surprise for me. Blink and you'd miss the fact they've been relegated and promoted in the last two seasons. Like Norwich, they're a yo-yo club, but they do it in less style. In 19th place, I have Brentford. Brentford were top scorers last season in the Championship, despite losing Ben Rama and Watkins from their BMW front three for a combined £50 million, mate. They replaced them with Ivan Toney for only £5 million, who got 33 goals and 10 assists in 48 games. They've lost Dalsgaard, Marcondes and Winston Reid, but they've splashed the cash a little bit on some young players, but I don't think it's going to be enough. Going down. The final side to be relegated is Newcastle. Last season seemed to be doom and gloom. Everyone was convinced Steve Bruce would add Newcastle to his relegation collection, but they ended up comfortable in 12th place. But if you look at their transfer activity this summer and the way they played for much of last season, I wouldn't be so sure they'd finish that high up again. The story for Newcastle has been the same for the best part of 15 years, bar that one season of magic in 11-12 with Demba Ba, Papi Cisse, Hatem Ben Arfa and Yohan Cabaye. Until they get the parasite that is Mike Ashley out of the club, they simply won't kick on. And I'd fear about Newcastle's ability of going back up should they go down again. In 17th place, of course, is Burnley. 17th place on 39 points, having scored 33 goals. Sounds more worrying than was reality for Burnley last season, who still finished 11 points clear of the dire bottom three, one of the worst in Premier League history. They've let go of 28-year-old centre-back Ben Gibson and replaced him with 20-year-old Nathan Collins. They've sent their young former Leeds goalkeeper Bailey Peacock Farrell out on loan to Sheffield Wednesday and replaced him with veteran Wayne Hennessy. And they've also released Robbie Brady. It's been pretty smart business from Burnley, but they've not been pulling up any trees. But they never do. 17th. In 16th place, I have Norwich. 97 points, best goal difference, best team in the Championship last season. They lost Ben Godfrey and Jamal Lewis for big money to Premier League teams, but that didn't stop them. Timu Pukki was third top scorer with 26 goals, and Emi Buendia was player of the season with 15 goals and 16 assists. Obviously, they've lost their star man, and Norwich staying up in general looks silly, given their proven track record of consistently going down. I do think all three promoted sides are bang in trouble, but it very rarely happens that all three go back down, and it's just boring, isn't it? If there is to be one survivor out of the promoted sides, most neutrals will want it to be newbies Brentford. I am no neutral. Norwich have done some smart business, bringing in exciting loan signing Billy Gilmore, along with club legend Brian Gunn's son, Angus, in goal. Obviously, Ben Gibson was great for them last season as well. I think Norwich will stay up. In 15th place, I have Wolves. Wolves have lost their goalie Rui Patricio to Jose Mourinho's Roma, but they brought in Jose Sarr from Olympiacos. It looks like Ruben Neves might go as well, but the biggest loss is their manager Nuno. They've brought in a couple of young defenders, but I do worry about them. I think they will be down there. In 14th place, I have Southampton. Southampton had the worst defence out of all the sides who stayed up last season, and it was even worse than Fulham and bottom side Sheffield United. Maybe if they shook off their knack of losing 9-0 all the time, they'd be safe from unwanted stats like that. Nothing of note has really happened for them this summer so far. They've lost 31-year-old left-back Ryan Bertrand on a free to Leicester, but they brought in a 23-year-old left-back called Roman Parod called Roman Parad, I don't know, from Stade Brest. In 13th place, I have Palace. They're the worst goal difference out of the sides who survived, but that was largely just from one game, so. Palace have been among the bookies' favourites for the drop since Roy left, and appointing Vieira is a risk, no doubt about it, but their signings have been, Chelsea youngsters Mark Gurhey and Conor Gallagher impressed me so much at Swansea, and I have no doubt they're going to do great at Palace. Teenager Michael Elise from Reading's obviously a big one as well. Joachim Anderson from Lyon, some great signings. There's been a massive squad overhaul this summer for Palace. Scott Dan, Gary Cahill, Connor Wickham, Nathaniel Klein, Mamadou Sakho, James McCarthy, Wayne Hennessy, Patrick Van Arnholt, Andros Townsend. The list goes on, mate. Well, actually, no, that is the list. It's over. But I like the look of their young signings. I think Palace is staying up. In 12th place, I have Brighton. They were the only team to survive relegation who didn't reach double digits in wins, and they had the most draws in the league at 14. They had a very solid defence though last season, and they only conceded 2 more goals than Man United. And one of them was scored after full time by Man United. They've let go of a bunch of squad members who have been around the whole time they've been in the Premier League. Jose Izquierdo, Bernardo, Matt Ryan, Davy Proper, Alareza Jahanbakhsh, who was their record signing at 17 million, and they've let him go for less than 1 million. But they've brought in a 6'8" goalie from Ajax to replace Matt Ryan, I imagine, on the subs bench behind Sanchez. And Enok Mwepu, a 23-year-old midfielder for £20 million from Red Bull Salzburg, who's already scored for them in the pre-season game against Luton. So I think Brighton will finally finish above Palace in the Premier League. And this sort of brings me to the middle of the video. I know we're not exactly in the mid-table yet, but I think Brighton and Palace are sort of the buffer zone in between the sides who I think could get relegated and sort of an established top 11. Last season there was a 10-point gap between 11th and 12th place, and it wouldn't surprise me if there was something similar this season as well. I think Brighton and Palace could potentially join that established top 11 and turn it into a top 13, but I think Brighton would have to sort out their striking options, and we're just going to have to wait and see how Vieira is in the Premier League, and whether or not he can get the most out of that exciting young squad. This collection of clubs coming up I found that by far the most difficult to predict, from 11th to, well, I'm not going to tell you where to, because that's a little bit of a spoiler, but I just have found it like nearly impossible to predict. Anyway, in 11th place is Everton. Everton fans have been dreaming of a return to their glory days for my entire life. In recent years, those dreams have never seemed more realistic than when Carlo Ancelotti was appointed. Yes, they finally beat Liverpool at Anfield, and yes, a new stadium is on the way, but the bottom line is it was more mid-table dross under Carlo. They've brought in Andros Townsend, Damari Gray and Asmir Begovic, which smells of more mid-table dross. I think Rafa's a great manager, but I don't think he'll ever get fully backed by Everton fans. In 10th place, I have Leeds. Now here's a side who absolutely backed their manager. They were the only promoted side to survive last season. And that might have something to do with the fact they scored as many goals as the 2 other promoted sides combined. Their left-back options have definitely changed as they've brought in Junior Firpo from Barcelona, but they've let go Alioski to Saudi Arabia and Barry Douglas back to Lech Poznan. Kiko Casilla and Pablo Hernandez have gone back to Spain, while they've signed Jack Harrison permanently from Man City now, after something like 3 years on loan. In 9th place, I have Tottenham Hotspur. It's all gone wrong at Spurs since their season of 2 draws, where they pipped Arsenal to the top 4 by 1 point and got to the Champions League final. Since then, Poch has gone and Jose has been and gone, where Amazon Prime have reaped all the reward of his impact at the club, while Spurs have reaped nothing. They had some good matches along the way, like away at Man United and Leicester, but it was nowhere near consistent enough to qualify for Europe. Well, proper Europe. Centre-backs Juan Foyth and Toby Alderweireld have gone, as has left-back Danny Rose, Gareth Bale and Eric Lamela. But they brought in youngster Brian Gill from Sevilla, and more impressively, Pierluigi Golini, a former average keeper for Villa in the Championship, turned Champions League regular at Atalanta. In 8th place, I have Arsenal. Despite the fact we're in the latter stages of Arsenal's decline into becoming a mid-table dross club, they actually got 5 more points last season than the season before. They finished below Spurs for the 5th season in a row, but I think that streak will finally end, and that has nothing to do with Arsenal. That's just because Spurs have declined so much. Spurs are just acting like a mid-table club. They've brought in a mid-table manager, and their star man is desperate to leave. In 7th place, I have Aston Villa. The only departures so far have been experienced fullbacks El Mohammadi and Neil Taylor leaving, but it does look like Jack Grealish might leave for 100 million. But I don't expect Villa to just collapse because of that. They were painted as a one-man team last season, but they weren't a one-man team really. They were missing Jack Grealish for much of last season anyway. I think their marquee signing, Emi Buendia from Norwich for 35 million, is a fantastic piece of business. They've also brought 35-year-old Ashley Young back to the club, where some people would say he played his peak years. Certainly the club where he's at his most consistent best, between the ages of 22 and 26. And he's come back after a year and a half in Italy, where he won the Scudetto under Antonio Conte. I think he'll bring great experience to the squad, and I think they'll do well this season. In 6th place, I have Leicester. 20 wins and 68 goals scored is among the best in the league last season for Leicester. But 12 losses and 50 conceded is mid-table behaviour. It's those sort of stats that meant they missed out on the top 4 on the final day of the season again for the 2nd year in a row after winning only 1 of their last 5 matches. As I mentioned, they brought in Ryan Bertrand from Southampton. They've also brought in big signings Bobakary Samare from Lille and Patson Daka from Red Bull Salzburg. I still think they're a great side, and I back Brendan to keep them challenging for the top 4, but I think they'll miss out again. But God, I'd love to see Leicester win the Europa League, by the way. I think it would be a better way of qualifying for the Champions League in some ways as well, as it would add to their fruity trophy collection from the last few years. Now in 5th place I have West Ham. Last season, wow. From 16th to 6th, Moise worked his magic. They were a very balanced side last season. They were lethal going forward, particularly in the second half of the season. But they were also very solid at the back with some of the league's best fullbacks and holding midfielders. That brings us to the end of the group of clubs I was talking about, 11th to 5th place. I think they're all interchangeable, really. But I do think there is now an established top four again. There hasn't been one since the noughties, really, since the rise of Spurs and Man City. It turned it into a top six, and then for the last couple of years, it's looked like maybe someone will break into it. Maybe Leicester will break into the Champions League. But it's not really worked out, and now I do think there is an established top four again. But the fall of the Big Six and the rebirth of the established top four has been triggered by the decline of Arsenal and Spurs. I don't think any of the sides will break into the top four. I might be wrong, who knows, but I don't think they will. That means in 4th place, I have European champions Chelsea. They had the second best defence in the league last season, but only Arsenal and Everton from the top half scored less goals. They've not brought anyone in really, and they have emptied their squad a little bit. They've released goalkeepers Jamal Blackman and Willy Caballero. They've permanently sold perennial loans Izzy Brown and Marco van Ginkel. Victor Moses and Fikayo Tomori, 2 players who were loaned out last season and were on the fringes of the squad anyway, have been sold for 5 million and 25 million each. And 34-year-old Olivier Giroud has gone to AC Milan for less than $1 million. I do expect Tuchel to bring in a few players, and I think they'll comfortably get top 4, but I don't think they'll put in a title challenge. In 3rd place, I have United. They finished second last season with the second most goals, wins, points and goal difference. They had the joint least losses as well, but 11 draws was their killer. Only Brighton and Fulham had more. United have brought back Tom Heaton, who came through their academy to be their 3rd choice goalkeeper. But more importantly, they've signed someone who came through Man City's academy, Jadon Sancho, 21-year-old from Borussia Dortmund for £78 million. He's clearly the sort of player they've been lacking for a while. And another one, Rafael Varane, 28-year-old from Real Madrid, an experienced winner. It's what they need, and I think they will put in a title challenge this season. I think their squad is looking very, very strong, especially their first 11. But as good as they look now, there are 2 sides who are better. In 2nd place, I have Man United's rivals, Man City! Hey! Last season, Man City had the most goals, best defence, best goal difference, most points, most wins, joint least losses. But despite winning a league and cup double, their season ended in tears. These heavy spenders love to say that their transfer policy doesn't involve breaking transfer records because they opt to sign 4 players for 50 million rather than upwards of 100 million for 2. But that's exactly what they're looking to do this summer in their pursuit of Grealish and Kane. And you can't help but admire their crazy antics, as it adds much needed spice into an otherwise boring period in between the Euros ending and the season starting. Young centre-back Eric Garcia and veteran striker Sergio Aguero have left for free to join Barcelona, while Scott Carson has agreed to hang around a little while longer in the Rob Green role to bolster their Champions League push. Surely Scott Carson isn't allowed to end his career with 2 Champions League medals. Surely. But as much as City are a near-perfect side, I think the winners of the Premier League will be Liverpool. Last season was a weird one for Liverpool. They're the 3rd best goal difference and obviously points, and they were only one of 4 teams to reach 20 wins. But those 9 losses, which were mostly concentrated right in the middle period of the season, really made it feel like Liverpool were rubbish. But the fact is, they ended the season so strongly with, 10 wins, straight wins to get into the top 4? And that was with Ozan Kabak and Nat Phillips at centre-back. And they started the season as firm favourites to win the league. And let's have it right. If it hadn't been for Virgil van Dijk being absolutely killed by Jordan Pickford, they would have won the league. Their away results at the big boys last season were very, very, very juicy. They drew at the Etihad and at Goodison Park, but they won away at Tottenham, they won at the Emirates, they won at Old Trafford, they won at Stamford Bridge. Yes, everyone has injury problems, but the fact they had so many in one season, in one position, is nearly unheard of. Coming into this season, they have Van Dijk, Joe Gomez, Matip, Konate and Nat Phillips at centre-back. The fact that position is so strong now, and if they go for a season where they're lucky with injuries, I still think they're the best team in the league. Look at the way they started last season where they had a fully strengthened team, and look at the way they ended it to get into the top 4. That's a champion-winning team. Don't get me wrong, it'll be very close, I think, between the top 3 teams this season, but I think Liverpool will come out on top. So, those are my Premier League predictions. Obviously, everyone has different opinions, and as I said in my Championship video, if you've got a different opinion than me, then just know that you're wrong.
It's a fact. I am not playing mind games. I am talking about facts.